I'm Adela Zhang, and I'm a Mellon Postdoctoral Fellow in the Department of Anthropology and the Cogut Institute. I am a sociocultural anthropologist, and I study how democratic institutions can actually restrict efforts to organize politically around important environmental problems, like heavy metal contamination and the loss of land and water. My research focuses on social conflicts over large-scale extraction of resources like copper, silver, and oil in Peru. Peru has some of the world's largest mines and major hydrocarbon deposits, so these conflicts are a source of anxiety for the government officials who have to authorize and regulate this activity, for foreign corporations who wish to invest, and for international development agencies. Each of these groups fears that protests will disrupt the global flow of metals. These protests are led by people whose lands and lives have to be organized to make resource extraction possible. The vast majority of those who are affected by this extractive activity are rural and indigenous peoples who have historically been considered second-class citizens and denied full entry to certain political rights, to own land, to earn a wage, or to have a say in whether or not mining or drilling activity can take place on their lands in the first place. So some of these extractive conflicts have led to deadly confrontations between those who are affected by it and police forces. In 2012, the Peruvian government institutionalized a conflict resolution policy called Diálogo, or dialogue, which promised to resolve these conflicts using concerted spaces for deliberation, compromise, and agreement. And they did so with financial backing from the Canadian government and the United Nations Development Program. Diálogo is imagined then as an alternative to road blockades or land occupations, forms of protest that are considered relatively violent, and also as a way to avoid the use of police force in interventions. So through dialogue, government officials and community leaders would come together and systematically produce agreements that can calculate and define equivalences between complex harms, like loss of land, physical ailments, or dwindling water sources, and restricted group of potential benefits, like business opportunities, social programs, and public infrastructure. The idea then is that through these agreements, extractive activity can continue to proceed without being disrupted by protests. But this policy of negotiating mining's harms can have important environmental consequences. First, it leaves the causes of those harms untouched, because the fact of extraction is never itself available for discussion. And secondly, it can turn the harms associated with mining or drilling into something that can be negotiated, but not necessarily resolved. For instance, a community that's been harmed by oil spills in their lands might be able to obtain funding for something they really need, like a school or a health center. But they are unlikely to receive a suspension of oil drilling activity, the restoration of a damaged environment, or even financial compensation for the losses that they experience. Dialogue also has important political and economic consequences. I find that rather than diminishing protest, dialogue can actually intensify them. It does so by linking extractive-related grievances to tangible benefits, thereby creating opportunities for affected peoples to gain entry into the world of capital ownership and productive citizenship. So rather than reducing protest, dialogue actually creates a political economy of harm, emerging relations, equivalences, and logics that rework environmental and health harms, like land loss, dust contamination, and respiratory distress, into things which can potentially be productive, generative, or even valuable. So in the case I study, a growing number of communities who have experienced harms over mining have now opened communal business enterprises, fought for subcontracting opportunities, and demanded the redistribution of mining royalties for public investment. Using the appeal of agreement and consensus, state officials today manage social conflicts over mining, not by resolving or compensating for the activity's harms, but by transforming them into the grounds for limited forms of social, political, and economic inclusion. This approach, I find, can enable mining activity to intensify, expand, and accelerate in rural and indigenous territories, But it also doesn't prevent protests. Instead, it has inadvertently made those protests productive and the harms associated with extraction negotiable.